welcome back everyone. It's been a while since we last did a video, but I think this one should make up for it. I think it'll be a pretty good one. So as I've been saying on Instagram, my first race in over 3 years is going to be on August 22nd at the Ontario Provincials for the individual time trial. And I've been talking a lot on Instagram about this new bike. Well, it's not really a new bike, but there's been a lot of changes made to the bike. And well, here it is in its final, I say final form, but there are a couple little things that need to change, and we'll talk about that in the video. Just for a little bit of backstory on the bike itself and why it looks so different than the last time you've seen it, probably 3-4 years ago. It's a few changes needed to be made straight off the bat because the bike in its previous setup was just not UCI legal. And then there were a couple changes, which I'll get to later here, that once I made the bike UCI legal, one change kind of led into another, where it was, I moved the saddle, for example, and that meant that I needed to change something else because something wasn't right or it wasn't working for me. And so that led to another change, and so things kind of went like that. The other reason that there are a lot of changes from the last version is I had been thinking about this for a while, and essentially what it came down to is money, as it often does. And I looked at kind of, Facebook Marketplace and Kijijis of the world and stuff like that, and I just wasn't really happy with where rim brake P5s, how much they were selling for. And I would always say things like, oh, well, mine's different than that one. It's got better wheels, or it's got better components, or anything like that. But the simple fact is no matter kind of how I spun it, the bike was it would never sell for, if I was looking to upgrade, it would never sell for anywhere close to what it was actually worth. And so it would be painful selling the bike for, say, 30% of what it's worth. But then also when I looked to upgrade to a new bike, though the new bikes of nowadays are just way too expensive. If I look at the new Cervelo P5, for example, it's around $18,000, $19,000. And that doesn't even come with a disc wheel or, a crank that I'm happy with, or this or that. And so by the time you start adding all these things, the new P5 might end up costing $25,000. And when I look at it, I would look at that $25,000 and I'd say, I feel like for a fraction of that, still a lot of money, but not $25,000, I feel like I can make the old rim brake P5, my existing bike, I feel like I can make it just as fast, or very close to as fast. And I think the finished product, I do think that this bike will rival almost any super bike of nowadays, if not being at least on par, if not faster than any of the current best super bikes of nowadays. So without further ado, I'm going to get into it, and I'm going to do it just like a GCN video. I'm kind of going to work front to back and top to bottom, and then I will actually also have another video coming out where I'm going to look at some of the other components in depth in terms of my rationale for them, or just the really fine details of them. This video is going to be a little bit more rapid fire, keeping in mind that it's me, and so when I say rapid fire, I'm not going to wrap this up in 4 minutes. That's not who I am. And so, grab yourself a cup of coffee, something like that, sit on. I hope you enjoy the next 10 minutes. Hopefully it's around that long. Alrighty, so starting front to back, right away we got a new front wheel. This is the Aerocoach Titan. I believe it's one of the fastest, if not the fastest, front wheel out on the market. It's a 100mm wheel, and I'll tell you, I was a little bit nervous about getting a 100mm front wheel at my weight, being a lighter weight rider, thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to get blown across the road or something like that. But I was absolutely blown away after the very first ride on this wheel, and I actually messaged Aerocoach, and I joked to them. I said, what kind of wizardry are you practicing? Because somehow the 100mm wheel is more stable than my Zip 454 previously, which is a 58mm front wheel with serrated edges. a wheel that has been specifically designed for handling crosswinds, and somehow here a wheel at almost double the depth is actually more stable. And then actually yesterday I rode it in quite windy conditions, and while the wind was pushing the bike a little bit, the thing about it was very predictable. It didn't seem like it was like kind of twitching and then trying to correct itself or something like that. It was a very predictable push that I could kind of lean against and ride still quite well, and still critically in the time trial position. So I'm blown away by the stability with the wheel, and then obviously it's also a super fast wheel. Attached to that, we have a Vittoria Corsa Pro Speed. I have it in a 24mm setup. It is a tubeless ready tire. However, maybe controversially, I have this set up with just your standard pink Vittoria latex inner tube. So there is a reason behind that. I get into a little bit more in depth in the deeper dive video. Essentially, it's that I'm not a huge believer in tubeless tires. I think latex are just as fast, and the maintenance is a lot easier. So there's the front wheel. I also have a tri-rig aero skewer with that wheel. Speaking of tri-rig, the front brake is a tri-rig Omega X. At some point I will upgrade to an Omega 1, which is maybe a little bit faster with essentially a little bit bigger of a fairing on the front. But this Omega X is still a really fast brake, and in kind of your standard, what we've come to expect from tri-rig brakes, the stopping power is incredible. And actually the brake pads on it are brake pads that are specific for the Aero Coach wheel. And it sounds weird with all these other upgrades, but the brake pads are actually really cool looking. They have a really different etching on them. So it's just kind of cool, and they make a really cool, nice sound. In terms of the brake levers, we have the SRAM Carbon S990 brake levers. I got the grip tape attached to them. Really good. Aero, obviously, but then also in rainy, if it's ever raining, the grip tape does a really good job giving you that confidence when you're going through turns or anything like that. So the front end, this is all brand new. Well, I shouldn't say completely brand new. It's the same 3-tier Duro base bar that we had before, but the front cockpit is entirely brand new. And so this is the Drag to Zero 0.44 extension system. Probably a little bit different looking than the 0.66 system that you've seen probably on some other pro triathletes bikes. The thing is that system is not UCI legal. The 0.44 is. And actually, just while I'm on Drag to Zero and UCI legality and stuff, the team over at Drag to Zero, Thomas, for example, was extremely helpful in helping me select certain bits and pieces of this front extension system to try to get it to be not only UCI legal, but to get into the position that I'm looking to be in, and kind of like push the limits a little bit. And so, for example, they advised me to go with the short armrests, which are 90mm long, and what that would, versus the standard, and what that would allow me to do is it would allow me to go to a 20-degree incline. For me, I'd rather be a little bit higher up with my hands, and the short, if I didn't go with the short, I would be limited at a 15-degree. And I had actually worked this out I had pulled up kind of the old trigonometry from high school, and I had worked out on my own, well, if my extensions are this long, then, you know, doing sine of whatever, you know, getting this angle and that angle and this length and that length, then it should mean that I'm around 15 degrees as my limit, upper limit. But if I went to the short armrest, then I could push that up to a 20-degree. I also have a 10mm riser underneath, and this we have tested. Me and my dad, we've tested a number of risers underneath, and so the great thing about Drag to Zero is that they're incredibly customizable, and so I could customize it anywhere from actually fully slammed all the way up to 100mm, and they have bolts specific for all of them, and it's fantastic. So attached to those, we have the ETAP clicks, and these hand grips I think are really a great thing on these bars. Not only does it, I think it puts your hand into a really great aerodynamic position. It was one of the reasons I decided to go with these over, say, the Fast TT system, is I think that the position it puts your wrists in, I think, is a lot more aerodynamic and a lot more ergonomic. And with the extension system being so stiff, the carbon bars being so stiff, you can really leverage them so well to get so much power off of them. And it sounds really weird, and I'll take a video here. It sounds really weird to say, but the Garmin mount here is actually one of the things, it sounds weird on such an expensive set of bars, but the Garmin mount is actually one of my favorite things on it. One, it has this really cool locking mechanism, so you don't have to have space to be able to turn the Garmin. It'll just go in there and lock in place, and then it stays very secure. And then the other thing with it is it's very customizable, so you could put all these different spacers to get your Garmin to be center between the bars. And I actually have mine just, as you can see, a little bit off center, and the reason for that is because I usually put my power in the bottom right corner, or always put it in the bottom right corner, and so I want to be able to have that kind of be basically in the center of the screen. Now, when I return to triathlon, they do have a tower mount that will raise that Garmin all the way up, and so I'll be able to see that over my bottles, but that is not UCI legal, so we have the standard. It sounds weird calling it standard, being, as you can see, so incredibly clean, and you can actually change the tilt on this as well. Sounds weird calling it standard, but we have the standard system in there for now. So that's the front end of the bike. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I'm missing? Oh, the other great thing with these bars is the cabling is incredibly clean. It goes through the bars and then through the risers, and then I've done this myself where I have it come underneath the adapter plate for the Enduro bar and then into the blip box. I consulted with Drag to Zero as well, talking about, you know, what's the fastest place for the blip box. Considering on the Cervelo you can't unfortunately fit the blip box underneath the stem cap. It would have been great if they allowed that, but nonetheless, consulted with them, and we talked about it and said that, you know, underneath the bars would be optimal, and so that's what I ended up going with, and I think it looks super clean, and critically it's also incredibly comfortable being in this position, and I could generate, as I said, a lot of power, being able to really kind of pull up on the bars hard and get my head kind of nice and low. So that's the front end. If you haven't noticed, so I'm working my way back. We have a Cervelo P53 frame. P53 just refers to the fork versus the P56. Water bottle, I haven't actually decided yet if I'm going to be taking fluids with me. I'd like to, at least to have some sugar in my mouth, to have, because that is a performance increase, even just like swishing around in your mouth. So I will likely take at least something with me, you know, at the halfway. It's a 40K time trial. Just kind of grab right before I hit the turnaround and then swish around for 30 seconds and keep on going. Saddle, we have bi-saddle. This is a split, a saddle that can be completely adjustable. So you can adjust the back, the width of the back and the width of the front. And so I have it set up where the back is as close together as it can be, like this, and the front as wide as it can be without causing thigh rub, and that's to really just take pressure off my pudendal nerve. It hasn't relieved that completely, but I do find it quite a comfortable saddle. And also the thing I like about it is, despite it kind of being so bulky with this adjustability, it is actually still a really small footprint, so it's very short, and so I like that it kind of looks still pretty sleek. So that's that. As I said, the bi-saddle SRT 2.0, and then the crankset. This is something that I'm incredibly proud of, and it took a lot of research and work to think about various things between not only just gear ratios and kind of what numbers that I'm looking for, but then also compatibility on various things. And this is one of those changes that I had to make in response to one of the changes for UCI legality. So essentially with the UCI, one of the old rules going back is that the saddle needs to be 5 centimeters behind the center line of the bottom bracket. And essentially when I moved the saddle back to 5 centimeters, instantly I found that this was causing impingement on my labrum, which I will be getting surgery for actually in just a few weeks. And so that was literally after ride number 1, and so I was pretty nervous, thinking, uh-oh, am I even gonna make it to race day? you know, without this, you know, really flaring up the hip. So what I wanted to do is I needed to figure out a way, okay, let me try to shorten my crank arm. I'm already pretty short at 162.5. Can I go for something even shorter? And so I decided to go with the Watt Shop Kratos crank, which is a really cool system. I'm actually going to come around here to show you. So what this crank is this can actually be adjusted to be anywhere from 145 millimeters all the way to 160 millimeter crank length. And the way that it can do that is with these very innovative pedal inserts. I have pedal inserts set up to be either 150 to 155, but you can purchase them to be anywhere in 2.5 millimeter increments between 145 and 160. 150 is a good length to me, one that I think would have actually been enough of a substantial change from the 162.5, something that I can actually feel. And since riding it, I actually feel it's already making a big difference on my hip. The impingement went away pretty much immediately. And so not only is it obviously just better biomechanically, but the added bonus with it is, as you can see, it is incredibly aero. The crank itself, and also it's really thick, so I feel like every single watt you got is being translated into forward momentum. Not only is it more aero just from the crank arm setup, but the really interesting thing with these cranks is that the Q factor is also much more narrow. So on your standard SRAM red crank, Q factor is 145 millimeters, and on these Watt Shop ones, it's 137 millimeters. So front to back is much more narrow, and so your legs are closer together, and that saves about 3 watts right there. As you can see, the chain line is also beautiful right now, and the reason for that is because I've gone with a Digerite 62 tooth chainring. The chainring is attached to a brand new SRAM Quark Axis power meter. I love Quark power meters. I feel like they're most reliable, simple power meters out there. This is actually my 3rd one now, and none of them have I've never actually ever replaced one because of a problem with it. It's always just because I've been changing this or that on the bike, and so I've needed to get a new system. So brand new SRAM Quark Axis power meter. That's a dub power meter, as it's a dub spindle, even though it would have connected to the other one as well with the 8 bolts of the Quark, and a brand new Ceramic Speed dub bottom bracket. It's called a BB Right for SRAM dub bottom bracket, and it's the coated version, so a little bit better, less friction with that, and just longer lasting as well. Your standard Wahoo Speedplay Aero pedals, and then moving on to the back. We have an brand new Aero Coach Ultra disc. The reason that I got a new disc is because my old disc, even though it was very fast as well, it was a tubular, and essentially what happened is I flatted it, and I was shocked when I went online to buy a replacement and found that I can't buy any replacement fast tubular. So they were almost impossible, as this is the first year in like 100 years that there are no teams riding tubulars in the Tour de France. And so trying to make this my forever bike for years to come, to steal a word from HGTV, I needed to get a brand new clincher wheel for that, so that, you know, if I had flats or anything like that, there wouldn't be, you know, a catastrophe. Luckily enough, the new clincher that I had to get was extremely fast. And this is, as I said, the Aero Coach Ultra. It's also very light. I'm talking crazy light. That's the Ultra version of it, so it's a little bit more expensive. But really cool wheel. I love the sound it makes. I'll show you the free hub free hub sound at the end of this video. It's pretty different because it's like silent, so it's like the silent killer. Attached to that, we have 1128. So as I said, 62 tooth chainring in the front, 1128 in the back. This is your standard Shimano Ultegra. I always go with Shimano cassettes over SRAM ones, even though, as you can see, it's a SRAM red derailleur. This is actually the SRAM red rear derailleur is actually the only, I believe it's the only piece of the previous iteration of this bike that hasn't been changed. Everything else is completely different. Even though I have the SRAM derailleur, I always go with Shimano cassettes. I feel like they're a lot quieter than the SRAM ones, which I find just really noisy and it's aggravating. So, Ultegra cassette and a KMC X11 super light gold chain. I think the gold chain looks great with the whole setup, especially with the tan sidewalls. On the chain and the chain ring, I will likely not be going with a chain catcher, even though the Digirite chain catcher is incredibly, it's stunning because it's completely carbon. It looks beautiful, but I've tested it out on the first few rides that I had on the new setup, and I went over some pretty rough roads and railroad tracks, and the chain didn't drop at all, so I don't think I need it. And so I think I could get away without one and just save maybe a couple watts here or there. And so I'm likely gonna go without one. With the chain too, I have this waxed with the Silca super secret, like the waxing kit. And I will, for race day, likely be putting in a couple of the speed chips as well to just really, really optimize the chain. On the rear, as I said, on the front, we have a Vittoria Corsa Pro Speed in a 24mm. On the rear, it's the same Vittoria Corsa Pro Speed, but in a 26mm, also with a latex tube. Front and rear, I'm going to be running at 73 and 76 PSI. Obviously, depending on the race day conditions, if it's wet, you know, we might drop that down a little bit. Also, tri-rig Aerocoat screws. And just while I'm on it, the things that will change for race day, I mentioned the chain. On this front wheel, you can see that it has a very beautifully, it hides the valve beautifully, but it can do even more. And so what I purchased with this wheel as well is the Aero snaps. And I just don't have that fitted on right now because I'm still trying to find a valve extender of the right length that can go under it. Tough to find because so many people are going with tubeless these days, it seems. And so it's tough to find a 48mm valve extender. But once I find that, and then I'll put that on, put the Aero snaps on, and we'll be good to go. And last thing, on the rear, final thing, on the rear, front wheel, I mentioned is to Tri-Rig Omega X brake. On the rear, we have a brand new Tri-Rig SL brake. And this is something I'm really, really proud of. I researched this like crazy. Previously, it had a TRP brake, which I absolutely hated and never worked. The Tri-Rig SL, which I didn't actually see get talked about anywhere, I figured with the smaller footprint of it, it could probably work in this underneath the Cervelo Aero cover and fit in the Cervelo. And I got it, put it in, and it's honestly like the bike was absolutely made for it. And while we're on the rear brake, let's get to the free hub sound check to finish this video off. So we'll spin this up. Pretty darn cool. As I said, it's a lot quieter than the DT Swiss hubs of before. Oh, and very last thing, I fixed, which I'm really, really proud of. I ended up fixing what had been damaged in Warsaw. The rear dropout had got damaged after the flight, and I got quoted $1,000 by a couple carbon guys, and it would take 3 weeks. I ended up fixing it myself in 24 hours for $200 all in, and it got me the space that I needed back. Essentially what was happening was the cassette was sitting literally on the dropout and kind of rubbing against it, or like very close to rubbing against it. It was less than a millimeter, and now it's back to being, it's hard to see on the camera here, but it's back to being some actual clearance between the cassette and the rear wheel, which just gives me that confidence of knowing that it's not rubbing while I'm going up a hill, for example, and that every single watt that I produce is, again, being translated into forward momentum. One more thing, just because I forgot, we've actually added this thing in, but the other little new thing is I have the Ceramic Speed pulleys. These aren't the oversized ones, these are the standard alloy ones, but they are still super fast, like all Ceramic Speed products. Super fast, and they're in my favorite color, in gold, which I'm thrilled with. We couldn't get a gold cassette, as I talked about at length on Instagram. I searched and searched, but there weren't any good options available. but the chain and the the pulley wheels will have to do for now. So that's the bike. I hope you enjoy this video, and if you're interested in seeing more of this bike, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and to see how fast, critically, how fast it ends up going in this 40K time trial. I think it's going to be really rapid, not only because the bike is fast, but then also, which I'll show at another time, the suit that I'm wearing is crazy fast. This is not your standard jersey and bib shorts. It is something really special, and excited to share with you and take you along on this journey heading into my first ever UCI event. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.